So one interesting thing about being a YouTuber is you actually have to be a stubborn optimist. It doesn't matter what kind of YouTuber you are, 20 million subscribers or 2 subscribers. What's going to carry you through this platform in your conversations or whatever it is you do is that optimism that you yourself sometimes cannot fathom. So sometimes this optimism, it could come out as a good thing, and sometimes you will be misread. It's a theme and a pattern, and I risk it, and we all risk it here. But one really interesting thing is we can continue to have the conversations, and we can be respectful about how we actually, go ahead and address different things. So I talked about my last video on Gotham Nights where I talked about the disconnect between gamers and developers. And in that video, I already said that once that video was done, I risked being called a shill. And I literally got it. Like, it didn't even take too long. And I already had people telling me I was talking nonsense and calling me a shill because I said that game developers and gamers have an opportunity to be able to educate one another. And in some cases, the criticisms that we get or give as gamers is lacking of context, a lot of knowledge, and in many cases removes the respect that we probably could gain from developers. So this kind of resonated with some people in a sense that they thought that I was saying that developers are shielded from criticism. Well, I don't know how they came to that conclusion, because if you go back and look at maybe my coverage from the past few months or years, you will see that I've literally been criticizing many video games. In fact, my opinions on Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League is absolutely not the most positive. Even though Rocksteady is my #1 developer in terms of my favorites, I have still made sure that they will be getting their criticism until they, reveal that maybe they can respond to it in a way, or they're making a video game that I suspect that they may be making. And again, the divide continues to grow because I think the nuance is lost in the conversation. It's one of this throw the baby out with the bathwater versus save the baby while you throw the bathwater out type things. And it's just maybe, in a sense, almost hard to put the genie back in the bottle. So let's just keep going. Now, the conversation stemmed around the GTA 6 leaks. I mentioned a few things about Marvel Avengers, and I even talked about the combat, how I thought Marvel's Avengers had very good combat. And I thought the game was a decent game. But I thought, why not just go ahead and just share a lot of what I've actually mentioned in comments and all with everyone here, so that you guys can actually see my perspective, and then you can get a better and a much more full context. So I bought Marvel Avengers. I played the beta. There were 2 betas, right? I played them both. I pre-ordered the game on 2 different platforms, and I got to engage with the game before it came out. So I knew what I was getting into, and so did many other players. But most of us still went ahead and, we bought the game. I don't know what we were expecting. Maybe we thought somehow the game would change before that beta and release, but it didn't happen. And so the very crazy thing about Marvel Avengers is when you say it, the Marvel Avengers is actually a pretty decent game, except that the framework is just bad. You're going to get hammered because in the minds of many players that got burned, Marvel's Avengers is a terrible game. Now, I tend to be one who is optimistic about things, so I'll tell you that there are aspects of Marvel Avengers that are actually good from a design and development perspective, and by that alone, I'm not willing to give anybody that concession that Marvel Avengers is a bad game. Not because your opinion is not valid, but because I just don't think it is a bad game. I don't think it's a full loss. It's a decent game. That's what it is. Because you all knew what the game was going to be before you bought it. I did, and I got burned. And honestly, I didn't enjoy the game because its framework was just bad. But the parts of the game that are good, that's why this channel exists in the first place, to highlight those aspects of the game. And so one really interesting thing that also came out of the conversation too was things like traversal, movement, because I did go ahead and mention that I thought that Natasha, the way she's designed here, seemed to me to be a much more flexible, version of the Red Hood himself. And so this has been very interesting, just reading comments, talking about that. And so first of all, let me address this. You can critique whatever game you want to critique. I don't care. It doesn't bother me. I'm not saying anybody shouldn't. In fact, you probably should. But what I'm saying is a whole different level of accountability, especially from seasoned gamers, is that whenever they critique video games, or whenever we critique video games, that we do it from a place of having better understanding about video games. I hope that's clear. If it's not clear, let me say it again. when we critique video games, the very best way that we can actually get our point across is whenever we are doing it from a place of knowledge. And the truth is, I don't pity any developer, because developers are doing their job. They're getting paid a salary, right? And everybody's got to do their jobs. And everybody, if you mess up at your job, you get maybe, a reprimand, or you get canned. And so it's just the same way. In fact, one of my audience members said, they're blue collar workers, that also do jobs too. So, I mean, why should developers be giving the benefit of the doubt while anybody else isn't getting that benefit of the doubt? I agree. I do a job too, and I get criticized at my job if I did something bad. In fact, I can almost tell you with a 95% certainty that if I asked any of you to do my jobs, you will probably say no. Now, if you want to know what I do, ask me in the comment section. Some of you already know what I do. You already know what I do for work. So you probably do not want to do my job. In fact, if you already know, comment and say, yeah, you don't want his job. The blue collar workers that even work around me tell me, bless your heart every day. I don't know how you do this, because I understand the challenges, but there is a need for understanding among all the parties in order for us to be able to have fruitful conversations. If not, everyone's going to be yelling over everyone and nothing is going to change. You're going to have the exact same dynamics go on. So this entire conversation really does have to happen, because I'm here to basically work on making sure these conversations are happening. And as time is going on, it's so cool to see that minds are changing. So let's go ahead and look at some game mechanics, because it's not all about just, talking about the prevailing situation. And let's look at a slight comparison between Natasha Romanoff and Jason Todd. In the design of Natasha Romanoff, you see that she's got two blasters, two sidearms. She's using them, and then, her movement is also really interesting. In fact, one of my audience members pointed out to her movement and said, it felt like the physics was way off for this character. And I agree. And this is where the framework of Marvel's Avengers is actually bad. So check this out. You have a full-blown human character that's roaming around with these mutants or, jet-propelled human beings, right? You have Tony Stark, Thor, you have the Hulk, and you have Miss Little, what's her name? Is her name Miss Marvel? I don't know. And they can all cover ground very fast, right? So in order for you to be able to, let Natasha Romanoff keep up, you have to give her a weird kind of movement mechanism where she can just sprint and jump like she doesn't have any resistance at all, because all the other characters have already covered ground and gone ahead of her. If you notice, I'm the only one running here. The other characters are already in the heat of the battle at this point, and so you kind of have to do that. Well, guess what? There is another character that also faces that same conundrum, because the framework of the game is a co-op style game in some aspect. Marvel's Avengers just forces you anyways. You can't even play solo. But in the case of, say, Nightwing and Red Hood, the trailer that we got to see, the Mystic Leap got a whole bunch of flack because people did not expect to see Jason Todd hopping over the clear sky. Well, how else are you going to do it? Are you going to give him a cape? Maybe give him a cape. Maybe give Nightwing a cape. Maybe give Robin a cape. In fact, I've also seen the criticisms about the teleportation as well. If this was a game that focused on single player only, I don't think it would have been a problem if all the knights could maybe just, glide everywhere. But because it's a multiplayer game, the need for variation and keeping things kind of maybe, interesting and putting a variety was probably a constraint that they had to answer somehow. So they gave your boy Red Hood some kind of a movement ability that could help him keep up, say in a situation where you're playing with a Batgirl main who just can glide from rooftop to rooftop. So these constraints in the framework really do make some games make decisions that are not so ideal. Now, I like the Mystic Leap. Don't get me wrong. I do for some strange reason. I think the thing is freaking cool. Now, this is the dev side of me talking as well, so you kind of have to worry about that in my evaluation. But this system is very challenging to make. I mean, think about it. You jump and you land on air and you spawn some kind of a physics particle that allows for you to do a double jump in the air by maybe using a button command. And then when you're done, you just don't do it anymore and you land in your specific location. it's actually pretty freaking awesome if you were to ask me, from a matrix, if you're looking behind the windows coding type of thing, even though it unnerves a lot of Red Hood fans. And I don't know why it doesn't unnerve me. I'm a Red Hood fan and it doesn't even bother me. In fact, I'm like, oh my gosh, why do I like this mechanic so much? But I think this conversation also goes too with preferences at the same time. One thing about gamers is we understand that we need to be picky about our games, but sometimes we don't want to admit that sometimes a game is just not for us. And once you get to that point, which I got to just a few years ago, it really did change my entire perspective. It allowed for me to be able to take a step back and look at every video game individually and just assess that video game based on its merits, look at its flaws, and then eventually say, okay, the merits and the flaws, how am I going to categorize them? And so this is something, in fact, other developers and other critics around the world, they do this. One of the best reviewers on YouTube in terms of video games is ACG. Have you watched a review from him? He does a review on sound, on things like dialogue, on things like some of the mechanics. He breaks it all down and gives them individual scores. And I think I've always enjoyed his approach because it also kind of influenced me in the way that I actually approach my own evaluations of video games. So I can tell you that Marvel's Avengers framework, absolutely terrible. Combat design and mechanics, very good. Implementation and cohesion of combat mechanics, well, framework holds it down because, yes, you actually have a good combat system, but because now you've shoehorned 4 different heroes, you now have limitations in how you can do it, and you now have a big arena, so your characters are going to play wonky compared to, say, another video game that's out there where you could actually do all of this stuff, but now you don't have the constraints of all of the other things. Like this one over here, the Arkham games, because they were focused on single player games, they provided you with very limited arenas where you could actually fight. So you could see the beauty of their entire gameplay structure because they made not only the framework very good, they made the combat also good as well. And then story and all of the other mechanics were just icing on the cake, different flavors. So when you look at a video game like that, it just really makes things, much more complex. It's something that's pretty cool. And so I think that's the ideology that I'm starting to develop. And it's risky, especially in today's world where many times people will take out their frustrations on video games on you. I've been doing this for a while, so I've seen a lot of it. And my approach is not popular, folks. It doesn't grow channels. It does not bring subs. It doesn't bring all the views. I'm telling you, you're going to see it. And so, but it's just something that is true to who I am and true to what it is that I want to do. And I do enjoy doing it. I do enjoy, basically seeing all of this in perspective. So when you see me talk about a game like Batman Arkham City or Arkham Knight, I'm looking at those different aspects. And I'm even talking about areas of preference as well. It's just like the Batmobile. I will tell you that the Batmobile, one of the cleanest and best designed automotive vehicles in video games. Implementation wise though, and cohesion in the game, absolutely nasty. They made a big mistake tying this Batmobile into so many things, but it doesn't take away the fact that that Batmobile is so good. I was so shocked when I saw a Batcycle in, Gotham Knights. I was like, what are they doing? They're trying to put a vehicle in a game that's following Batman Arkham Knight. That Batcycle better be pristine. And if not, it's going to get that judgment. Yes, I will make the video. And if that Batcycle does not feel good, if the physics don't rhyme, you're going to hear from me. But that doesn't mean I'm going to throw the entire game away. That just makes no sense to me. But anyways, I wanted to go ahead and do this rant because I felt like you really have to break down these conversations. And if you do it in one video, you could be misread or misheard. And it's very important that we continue to just talk about this and expose and at least expand all of this as much as we can. So yes, bring your criticisms, but just don't sound like an idiot when you're actually reading it out loud. Thanks for watching the video. I appreciate your time and audience. Peace out.